by Lead Humano with your host, Luz Frazier, and
your host, Rocio, where we rise and thrive and talk about all topics on career development, regardless of where you are in your career.
Isn't that the truth? It doesn't matter where you are in your career. This topic for today is something that's absolutely relevant for all. Rocio, tell us, what is the topic for today?
Yes, I know most of you know it, but performance review season is upon us. And I know that's a topic that a lot of people might feel a little bit nervous or uncomfortable with.
Nah.
Right? It shouldn't be a nervous season, but it is. So we thought that we would talk a little bit about what to expect, what to do, and it's all dependent on where you are in your career specifically. If you're a new hire, if you've been with your organization for a couple years, or in general, if you just don't know where to start.
And no matter how long you've been in your role and working for an organization that keeps a rhythm or a cycle, it's a yearly thing of performance reviews, I think there's something for you during the time that we'll spend together, because it is quite complex, and you hear quite a few people, Rocio, talk about, it's performance review time. So whether you are an employee that's an individual contributor on a team and you are evaluating your own performance, or you're a manager and you're not only evaluating your own performance in what we call the self-assessment, which we're going to further define, you are then evaluating your team. So you're evaluating yourself so that your boss gets your self-assessment. You're evaluating a team of individuals that could be anywhere from 2+ individuals. I've had my own experiences managing performance and doing reviews for up to 23 people.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to talk about it from all different angles and all different perspectives, because we think that no matter who you are within the organization, there will be something that you'll benefit from it.
Oh, completely agree. So should we get started with the notorious self-assessment?
Yes.
What's your point of view on that?
The self-assessment. Gosh, this is the part where, look, I used to be in the HR business partner role, and so whether I get it as an HR business partner or I'm behind it as a manager, leader of people within an organization, it's that dreaded, you want me to write about myself? You want me to go back a year's time to talk about my performance? And in some organizations, you want me to talk about it from the perspective of, these 6 core competencies, these core values, and plus all the goals. And by the way, my manager didn't give me goals, so what do I talk about if my manager didn't give me goals? Look, it's really complicated. And in my point of view as an HR professional and someone who's been seasoned in this space, I don't think organizations got the performance management process right. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I'm speaking from an HR and functional leader perspective. Rocio, what's your perspective earlier in career but still with people leadership management experience? What do you think organizations got it right?
I think there's definitely a lot to improve, but one thing that I always tell my colleagues or team members is that even though it's an unpopular opinion, that I personally do like the self-assessments, because I think that a self-assessment is your biggest tool to market yourself towards the score or towards the value that the organization will give you after a performance review. For example, yes, it's very hard to go back a year and remember everything that you did, but I think that just the exercise, taking that hour during work and making an outline of all the projects that you led, all the projects that you added value, the extracurricular, if you were in one of those business resource groups, if you led a group, if you were able to create a new tool for the team. I try to shift the perspective, and regardless of the maturity of the performance review system that an organization has, I always look at it as, how can I market myself so that the organization knows the value that I already know I hold? So I try to look at it that way, and I feel better about it.
Spot on. I've my manager's job.
Yeah.
Why do I have to do it? But Rocio, you're so right. Look, do you want to leave it up to your manager to remember if they haven't noted a file with your name on it and put in that file all the amazing things that you contributed to throughout the year? Come on, let's face it. It's kind of unrealistic to think your manager is going to capture all things throughout a year. And some organizations have quarterly events, even every 3 months. If they've got even 5 individual contributors on their team, that means 5 different reviews. They're going to miss something. So Rosia, you're saying, look at it from the perspective, mindset is everything, right?
Yes.
Look at it from the mindset of, this is my opportunity that allows for me to showcase, put a spotlight, put a shine on all the work that I've done so that nothing is missing in that review. And this is a really important moment. So rather than thinking about it like, oh, more work to do, I gotta take the time to do it, think about it that this starts to ensure that you get the proper recognition. Has that worked out for you, Rocio, when you've done it?
I was just thinking about that. I'm a very type A person, so in the past it has worked very well for me. I remember when I was like my first co-op experience, I had a performance review and I didn't know how to prepare. I really did not know this was for me. In college, it was like get the internship or get the job. I didn't really think about, okay, once I'm in the job, what am I supposed to prepare for it? How am I supposed to market and value myself and make sure that I'm putting that out there for my team and my manager? But regardless, I had a negative experience where I didn't prepare. And so when I had that performance review with my team leader at the time, they didn't really understand the value that I brought to the team. And not to say that your people leader should be more aware of the things that you are doing and the accomplishments you're doing and celebrating you, but I feel there's also some accountability for yourself to make sure that you're elevating the work that you do. But that's not super easy, right?
Not super easy, but think about the power of really from the beginning, right? And we'll encourage you, no matter what stage within your career, if you haven't done this before, is to empower yourself. Empower yourself to be your top representative.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, when we think about the fact that we go home and we talk about what happens at work with our families or with our friends, we're always like, well, they didn't do this, my manager didn't do that, nobody recognized me for this, nobody recognized me for that. And look, being a people manager, an organizational leader, functional leader in the past, I try to capture those moments and recognize them, but golly, it is hard to capture every moment, acknowledge every point, and so give us a little help, right? And Rosia, what I'm hearing you talk about is the fact that it's okay to be empowered to own your recognition of contributions.
Yes.
Right? And I paused there because I was going to say also to recognize that you should be rewarded for certain things, and it's okay to talk about it and to say, you know, here's my self-assessment, and there's certain things that we're going to advise that should be part of the self-assessment. So Rocio, when you've done your self-assessments, what are the key things that you are drawing upon to ensure that you get acknowledged for? What are the things that you focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to accomplishments that I want to make sure that I get recognition or at least some feedback for in performance reviews, if you have monthly, bi-weekly, or even quarterly one-on-ones with your people leader, I do encourage you to have a one-pager of what's going well, what's not going well, what are some barriers. And in the bottom of that one-pager, I've listed projects that I'm in process or I've already completed. So by the end of the year, I have an outline with all of the projects, everything that I've led, everything I'm a part of the organization, I already have it there. On another side, I want to be fully transparent that I didn't get here overnight. I've always struggled with validation, and specifically at work. You know, I'm definitely a cheerleader, and I love for people to cheer me on also. So regardless if you have a people leader that will be very in your face and cheering you on, or if you have more of a silent or detached people leader, you can always make sure that you're valuing your work by mentioning it. For example, you're at a tier meeting and it's a Friday, and to close the meeting, I just want to highlight this win for the team. I was able to complete this project on time.
Yes.
It's okay, you celebrate yourself, and in turn, if the culture in your organization isn't there yet, that's okay because you can make a difference and you can start celebrating your team members' accomplishments, and that energy will catch like wildfire.
Yes, it does.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say, Rocio, is take the time to acknowledge yourself. It's okay. Give yourself permission to talk about what you're accomplishing. And it sounds like that when you're doing it, you're bringing other people in also. So you're acknowledging your work, but if you worked on the team, you're saying, and it's part of a team with or led by, we were able to accomplish, and my contributions were to lead the change management process of the new system that we implemented.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that. And here are the things that we were able to do collectively as a team. What's your part? What's your team's part? You know, when I think about the self-assessment process and how organizations really want you to connect to what's most important to the organization, which is those big organizational goals. So let's first, Rocio, like break it down into these, like there's those organizational goals, then your functional leader will get those goals from the CEO and the senior leadership team. Somehow throughout the time in which they're preparing for this, it gets to your team leader. Whether you have a team leader that's a director level or manager level or supervisor level, you're going to be asked to create goals. So for me, the self-assessment, even if it hasn't formally been introduced to you as a goal, think about what were the things that were most important for my team, my function, as part of the organization. What were those things and what did I do to contribute those things? So if your organizational leader didn't by chance cascade those goals, feel free to think about what were those most important things that we kept talking about in our team meetings. Write about those things. It will resonate. The organization wants to compensate, reward, acknowledge the things that got done that were aligned to what was most important for them that year. And so once we do that, Rocio, I think about it from the perspective of what did I do, and then how did I do it?
That's a really good point. And even if your functional leader didn't provide the goals for your specific team, usually organizations have the organizational goals printed in some public space, and you can always cascade from there. But I'm interested in learning from your perspective as a manager who's done performance review. What are those special skills that you look for in an employee when you want to recognize them? Or can you tell me about a past experience you've had with that?
It's a great question, Rocio, because it's important to know what the manager's point of view is typically, right? Because then you can align yourself. It's such an important point of view to have. I would say that managers are typically looking for the things that align to what's most important to the organization. Why do I say that? Because they also have a manager, and their manager has a manager. It goes all the way up to you get to the CEO. And the CEO and his direct reports, which are usually the functional leaders, whether it's a chief officer or senior vice president or vice president level, they're meeting. They're meeting and they're going to do what we call a reconciling, if you will, or calibration of performance. And now I'm giving you the inside scoop.
That's what I was just thinking.
Right?
I was like, we have an insider.
This is the inside scoop, everybody. So listen up. I'm telling you, this happens. So in order for you to, let me back up. Most people don't know how they end up with that percentage for their increase. This is how this happens.
Cool. Tell me
It is all based on the self-assessment connected to the review that your manager had of you. So they take your self-assessment, whatever you wrote. This is why I loved, Rocio, that you said, this is your moment to shine. Don't look at this as extra work. Look at this as an opportunity for you to really cement, right? And really put a stake in the ground in terms of your contributions so that it's known. The manager looks at that, puts their comments. So now you have one document. That one document goes to your HR business partner, goes to your manager, managers, and then it ends up on a spreadsheet, and there's all this data that is accumulated. But the most important part is this like rating. So every organization has a rating. And that rating then needs to be, for lack of a better word, it needs to be justified. So Rocio is a top performer. She did her self-assessment. It's glowing. I, the manager, agree. Superstar status. Yes, yes, yes. Exceptional. Rating number 5. Now you go into the meeting with HR and the functional leader of the organization, preparing for a roll-up view of the organizational ratings, because every rating is attached to a percentage of a dollar amount. And what will happen is that somebody will challenge that. What do you mean Rocio's a 5? Nobody's a 5. Nobody's perfect. It should be nearly impossible for anybody to be a 5. And literally that debate is happening. Literally the debate of like there should be a very small percentage of individuals that are top rated. There's a percentage of individuals who are lower performers. We have to recognize that. That's what leaders are saying. Like, there are individuals that are underperforming, and then the majority are in the middle. And so the debate, you can imagine, what do you think is happening when you have that bell curve?
I'm already getting nervous from everything you just mentioned. I remember at a past organization, again, at a co-op when I was still in college, where they were talking about the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the only loophole, or maybe not a loophole, but an area to improve is that what if you have 3 5s in your team, but you only have spot to give 1 5 to, then you have 3 really good performing employees. 1 feels that they're being compensated and recognized, and you have 2 that feel they feel bad about themselves because they didn't hit that number, not because of the skills that they had, but because of the quota. So that was my first knee-jerk reaction when you mentioned that, just because, of course, from where I am in my career, I've never been in that discussion, I've never been in that room, but it seems as if you have to be ready as a people leader to defend the people on your team that are overperforming so that they can get that score, so that they can get that compensation. So I bet that's very difficult from a manager's perspective. I also have a question for you, and I bet a lot of people are curious. As a manager, do you get nervous when you're giving performance reviews, or is it just the person receiving it in your perspective?
Absolutely.
Right?
Get nervous.
Managers get nervous too.
Yes, because you painted the scenario that's happening behind the scenes, right? Look, the organization doesn't have, and this is going to sound controversial, and I'll accept it. There is a budget. I was about to say it doesn't have an endless pool of dollars. Organizations make money, so I want to acknowledge that, yes. What it doesn't have is an endless pool of dollars, because there is a budget in which you're working with. So every year, organizations, right, this is where understanding how businesses run is important. They set aside X amount of dollars for performance reviews. Some organizations get this, and they're amazing at paying for performance. And if you're a 5, and your self-assessment and your manager's in agreement, and there are other individuals that have observed this, say yes, then yes, you're going to be recognized, and your compensation is going to align. Other organizations, they're not set up that way. They have a finite amount of dollars. They have a perspective of how many of each of the rating categories need to fit in order to exhaust the dollars that they have funded, and that's where the debate is. And quite frankly, going back to your original question, Rocio, that's where I get nervous. Because I get nervous with the fact that I generally want to recognize those who have performed. If you were at an exceptional or, um, exceeds expectations, I want to be able to recognize that without feeling that I have to knock it down one to fit into some type of rubric that the organization's asking me to leverage. And so, look, we're having real talk here.
Yeah.
And I recognize that this conversation is probably getting people to feel a little uncomfortable. But it's important to know how business works. This is the way it is. There's a budget, and you've got to work within the budget. And so there are two things that I would say. Do not let this discourage you from being at your best at work, because when you're at your best at work, and people recognize that, and it will be, maybe not fully with the compensation that you want, but if you're recognized, then it opens up doors for advancement. And so, Rocio, this is a conversation we can bring back in our next series of this conversation, because we'll continue to build. But there's this whole process within organizations called succession planning and succession management that we can talk about. Let's put that aside for now. Let's just focus on the performance management process. The point I think that we're trying to make here is that you need to put your best foot forward.
Of course. And incredible point. I completely agree with that. And you will all see a theme in all of our episodes. We always want to put as the forefront that we're all human before any job title. And similarly, with performance reviews, never feel that you are competing against your team members. Please do not compete with your team members. You're there to support each other. And if you ever try to quote unquote win or try to sabotage another team member to get a better performance review, that won't work.
It won't work.
It won't. And by you helping another person shine in your team, by you helping your people leader shine in your team, you are again displaying the value that you have to the organization. So that would be my biggest tip with performance reviews. Don't feel discouraged if you didn't get the score that you wanted. Don't feel discouraged if your work best friend got a better score and you've helped them in most of their projects. You can always show your value without dimming another person's value.
100%.
And people forget that.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because it can be quite competitive at times, because people are vying for the top comp rating, etc. I want to talk about, I'm pausing, Lucio, because I want to talk about how that evaluation starts to break down from the employee perspective. So when I'm creating my own self-assessment and I'm presenting it to my leader, right, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of everything I've done is so valuable. And I'm eager to be recognized for that. What's happening on the manager side is that there's a perspective of, because you've done all that's been expected of you and you did a good job doing it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have been exceptional during the year. So I want you to also share, so have a think about this, Rocio. You know, when we evaluate ourselves, we're like, of course I was exceptional. I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. When a manager is reviewing this and is working with HR, we're looking at it from the perspective of course, great job. You met expectations. You're a 3. I'm using that as an example depending on your rating, right? You're a 3. You met all of the expectations. For the leadership team, that's it really is. What's interesting is, for us, we're like, oh, that's just average. That's in the middle. I did a lot more. I should be recognized for the more that I did. And so if you're one of the individuals that have struggled with that, here's what I have to share from an inside view is, if you want to be recognized for exceeding those expectations, so not meeting them, but exceeding them, and definitely if you want to be exceptional, you've got to do what was expected of you, the metrics, the goals that you were aligned to, the projects you were expected to do. you've got to do all of those, the what and the how. So you got to do them, and then you got to do them well. Like, people didn't quit because they were part of your team, because you were impossible to work with. You didn't give everybody a hard time about everything. The what and the how, and you've got to be able then to say, I did all of that, that meets expectations. Plus, I volunteered for that project. I went on to the ERG and I took on a co-chair role.
Yes.
I did this for the community in which, I was branded our company. I took on a new skill set because we rolled out that new system, and so I was the leader. I was a change ambassador. What were the additional things that you did? That's what's going to differentiate your evaluation from a manager's point of view, from a meeting expectations, which I will stress again, I know it sounds odd. It's actually awesome. If you're meeting expectations, you get that 3, it's awesome. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. They're very happy with you. If you're doing more than that, that's where the extra comes in. Does that, tell me what you're experiencing with what I just shared.
I was thinking about, I completely agree with everything you mentioned. I also think that there are some individuals that go through performance review. They've done the Excel part that you're talking about, but then they don't write it down in the self-assessment.
They forget to write it.
Yeah, or again, it's all about marketing yourself. This in your resume. I really want to reinforce that. So for example, usually with performance reviews, if it's digital, there's going to be a comment section. And what I've done in the past is, this is how I met the goal for the mid-year or the end of the year. This is how I excelled, and I write a separate section on how I excelled on that goal. And also, I don't think we really mentioned that it's okay for you to put how you can improve for the next time. I usually also include that. But there's a fine line between how you can be better at your role, or how you could be better for the second half of the year or for the next year to come, without selling yourself short. So for example, I met the goal, I got the profit for the company, just using a random example. There is also an opportunity for me, even though I met this goal, to be a bit more adaptable. I got very nervous, and it took me a week to really restructure my project, the team member, the scope, but I got there. So I learned that for the second half of the year, I'm gonna become more adaptable. And that's not selling myself short, that's actually making sure that my people leader knows that I have self-awareness. And I think that's a quality that a lot of teams and people leaders are looking for during a performance review.
Self-awareness is so important.
Yeah, vulnerability.
So important. And having the vulnerability to say, yes, I know that I nailed it, I killed it, I was like really great at this part, and this I'm still learning. This part here, I'm still learning, I'm still trying to develop myself. And that already starts to show signs of someone that has, and we're going to talk about this at some point, potential. Right? When you hear in the organizations leaders talking about who are the individuals that are showing potential, and what does that actually mean in an organization when you're trying to advance, when you're trying to climb the ladder or do the monkey bars because you're trying to get somewhere and you're trying different things. So another conversation for us to have at a different point. Back to the performance review process, I just want to summarize a couple of things. You hit on so many key points, Rocio, and I think between us, we're talking about the fact that the performance review process is an opportunity for us to share our voice, to get super clear with not only ourselves, but with our managers and others that are going to be reading the review, that we've accomplished a lot. So we're not going to let it be for someone else to remember. We're going to do our work, and we're going to use it as a marketing tool. I love the way you described that. We talked about that self-assessment should be a related goal of the business, so an organizational goal or a team goal, or if you had an individual goal given to you. Like Rocio said, just find the goals and attach to them,
Mhm.
regardless of the scenario in your organization, because it's going to differ. We talked about writing what you did and how well you did it. So the what is the performance, it's the metric, it's the thing that individuals are saying, yes, you did that, and the how is your behavior. That's where things start to tie in terms of the organizational core values,
Mhm.
the organization's leadership competencies, if you are a people leader and you're doing your review.
Yeah.
All of these things start to tie in. What else should we summarize with this? So we also recognize that there's an annual review process, and you might have to remember 11 months back. Or Rocio talked about the quarterly, right?
Yeah, it depends on the organization. You can have quarterly reviews, you can have, but usually it's mid-year reviews and then end of year. And then we also talked about a tip if you have regular one-on-ones with your manager and you want to also gain that perspective or just awareness of the projects you're in process or completed, you can add that as a one-pager or even as a four-blocker. Because if you have the right communication between you and your people leader, your performance review at the end of the day should not be surprising. But that's not always the case, right? So in our next episode, we want to talk about what happens if you don't agree with your performance review. How do you talk about those goals that you didn't meet,
Yes.
but you still worked hard and you still created value? So that's just a bit of a teaser for everyone to watch our next episode.
Look, if you're listening right now, I know you have access to the comments. Just drop a comment. Have you ever been in a position in which you didn't agree with your manager's evaluation? Sign me up right now.
I'm nervous laughing.
Yeah, sometimes you're sitting in a meeting. I can't wait for this next episode because they're talking to you and you're like, right? It's like, were you in the same organization? Are you working for the same company I'm working? Are we on the same team? Like, you don't know where they're coming from. And look, I've been a people manager for many years. I get it. I can even share stories, but I love that that's going to be our next episode as a part 2 to this, Rocio. You know, and as we begin to bring this conversation to a close, I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about something that I hear you talk often about, and even in our work about unlocking the secrets to early career success, even though this is relevant for anybody. This is not just for people who are just starting their careers. We talk about the fact that there are important roles in the organizations that you should use strategically. As it relates to a performance review process, and having the advocacy or the sponsorship that you think is important to have, I think is important to have, because again, when the managers meet in a room, your mentor could be there, your sponsor could be there. Can you talk to us a little bit more of how you've established such relationships? Tell us what the relationships are, what they mean, define them, and then how have you leveraged them?
Of course, I can give my best description. Okay, so sponsor. That is someone higher up in the company. It can be an executive that you aspire to have their role in the future, or normalize having a sponsor that they match your values. That's equally okay. The point is that a sponsor has a role that in a room, that they will for sure be in a room with other executives making important decisions about next steps for the company, and a sponsor will bring up your name if an opportunity is brought up.
They're also in the organizational performance management calibration meeting.
Yes, that was a mouthful.
Yes, I'm going to say that really slow. But that's what's happening, and Rocio Bravo's name comes up as exceptional, and you've got your organizational or functional leader, and then you have an executive that's there that knows you really well, that is sponsoring you, essentially, saying, I know Rocio. She's working hard on that. She deserves that rating. Is that how that works?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. And then the other one that comes to mind is mentor.
Yes.
Mentor / coach. That is a person I still think about when I think about a coach or a mentor, I still think about someone who's a bit more advanced in their career than where you are. That person is coaching you more on a monthly or quarterly basis, and they're giving you direct feedback when it comes to both your soft skills and your technical skills. Again, I like to have mentors that are part of my career path,
Yes.
but also mentors that have the same values that I have, which I love, and bring their most authentic selves to work. I gravitate towards that. That's why I gravitated towards you when I first met you.
Well, there's a lot of synergy there, and there's that reverse mentorship,
Yeah.
where I learned from you. So let's further define, because I love the way that you broke down that you could have your sponsor, you can have a mentor, and a mentor can be mentor and coach. So
Yes.
the way that I describe that is your mentor is the person that you go to for advice.
Mm.
I'm in this situation, or I'm writing my self-assessment, and I'm really
Ooh.
stuck on, like, how would you describe how I demonstrate this core value? A lot of organizations will ask you to self-assess on the core values, the behavior, the how. Your mentor can give you advice. The person that you choose as a coach is probably someone that is very specialized in areas that you're interested in learning more about, because the relationship is more developmental.
Mm.
So the mentor is giving you advice and guidance. The coach you're going to say, hey, Coach Luz, let's say I'm your coach, you might say, there's something I want to develop. I want to learn to be more critically thinking. Like, critical thinking skills came up with at my one-on-one conversation with my manager. They want to see me do more critical thinking. I don't really know how to... I don't really know how to go about that. But I know that people see you as a critical thinker. Can you coach me? Tell me, how do I develop this skill? So again, the mentor is providing advice, the coach is providing development, the sponsor is your advocate speaking on your behalf. They all play a role throughout, whether it's an annual, mid-year, quarterly review process. Leverage these individuals that you're hand selecting for your benefit, and you'll see that the end of the year review process, whether it's again mid-year or whatever it is, you will have the best possible outcome because you've got all these inputs. You can go places to leverage where you get this input. Does that make sense?
No, well said. I always get confused by mentor and coach, and I think you said it really well. That's like a mental note for myself. I guess, and maybe we don't have enough time, I don't know, but later on we can also give a couple tips on how to even find a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor.
Yes.
I don't know if a lot of people know how to do that, so
It's
stay
a great
tuned.
point. Gosh, that was like a carrot you dangled.
Not for right now.
Do you like carrots? Cookie? I don't know what we're dangling in front of you, but that basically means like hit the subscribe button, follow
Please do.
us.
Follow us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And we're always finding new ways to make sure that we spread our word. At the end of the day, our mission is to provide the tools, the tips that we wished we had
Yes.
when we encountered so many of these topics, questions, and in general, the nuances of having a career.
For sure. So, you already know what to do. Drop a comment, hit the subscribe button, follow us on all the channels that Rocio talked about, and stay tuned because we're coming back at you. Part 2 of this conversation that we're having on performance management is about
What if you don't agree?
what if you don't agree, what do you do,
Yes.
right?
And how to do it tastefully.
Yeah, look, I'll give you a little tease on that. Have you ever been in that position where the manager says, here, just sign here, sign your review here, paper or electronically, put your signature that you agree on the review, and you just don't want to. Rocio's already cringing.
I am cringing.
It's happened to me. It's happened to you.
When I was super young, that was
Well,
traumatizing.
okay, well,
Well, you know what I mean.
I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, everybody, thank you for tuning into Career Vibes to Thrive. This podcast number 2 was brought to you by Lido Humano, and it was all about the performance management process.
Yeah, and then we're gonna end with our